I feel like almost all of these things start with mindset, right? And I think that's something you dive a lot into. So I would love to kind of just go down that rabbit hole in terms of mindset, right? Because I think this is just one form of it, but it's very tough to develop self-awareness, I feel like, for a lot of people, right? Because you don't want to admit just the truth. It's brutal, right? And so I think a lot of people, there's a term that I spoke about this the other day with someone. It's like you're in a loop, right? Because you want to change, but your body's not letting you, your mind's not letting you, and you get stuck in this cycle over and over and over again. And it's a toxic cycle, and it's a loop, right? So how did you develop that self-awareness to basically break past that loop?
Yeah, well, I think I think about breaking down the word mindfulness because it all comes back to this idea. Like, what does mindfulness mean? Well, on the surface, like, we could use the definition in the word. Like, our English teacher would hate us, but mindfulness is the art of being mindful. To be mindful is to be aware, right? So on the surface, you'd say, oh, mindfulness is self-awareness. But to your point, what does that really mean? Like, I could be aware that I'm a raging alcoholic and I should stop drinking. I could be aware that I shouldn't be spending 10 grand at a club every weekend. I'm aware of problems, but unless we're willing to then say, okay, this is a problem that needs to stop, what is the value of self-awareness? There's not a lot of self-awareness in a vacuum is not that valuable.
Correct.
When it comes with actions, that's where the real value is, of course. And we all know this, but to everything we're talking about here, changing a course of behavior can be incredibly uncomfortable, especially one that is the result of conditioning in childhood, adolescence, and that's been reinforced through years and years and years of repeated narratives in your head. If you're telling yourself yellow car, you're going to spot yellow car everywhere. And yellow car being a conditioned interpretation of life or of yourself. So for me, when I think about the word mindfulness is self-awareness, but that's not enough. To be truly effective and lead to action, it has to be mindfulness is self-awareness. Self-awareness is radical honesty. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? We can say, I have this problem. Why? Let's get to the why of it. Where is this coming from? Again, it's a little stronger. It's still not great because there's certain instances where we're willing to be honest, certain instances where we're not willing to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think the word why, W-H-Y, is the most powerful word in our arsenal. I think we're very quick to not ask it. I think we're very quick to only ask it once. I think you need to ask yourself why many, many times, both in regards to what you're doing and what you're not doing, who you are and who you are not. I think it's very important. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think mindfulness is challenging what you know and showing you what you don't know. And if you're not open to both of those things, it's not going to be that valuable. So I think, to be a mindful person is humility. It has to be. And if you don't have that, if you're rocking with ego's the enemy vibes, it's just not going to work for you. And yeah. I know lots of self-aware people who are very destructive. Does it really matter? And they know it too. It's, you talk about the idea of manifestation, for instance, about the way that you can speak things into existence. Well, you can observe life and you can have certain perspectives on life that reinforce destructive habits. So I think we have to humble ourselves massively. And I think the easiest way to do this is therapy for one, but journaling. I think journaling is the greatest way to finally be like, I'm going to be honest with myself, not self-aware, but honest. And then we're going to see what goes from there. But yeah, it's if you don't want to be that way, you're not going to be. So you've got to find the right catalyst, and then you've got to be in that humble headspace.
So tell me a little more about journaling, because I've never journaled before, but I know it's, so many people do it, and it's I've heard just amazing things. What would you say are the benefits of journaling?
Yeah, you should journal. You should do a little ice cold plunge and then journal. Yeah. That should be a good.
I think that's a great morning. Right now, I do the ice plunge.
Yeah, I saw it out there. Yeah, it looks dope. I mean, I always wanted to be a journal guy, right? I remember, 2016 or 17 being like, oh man, everyone's journaling. Like, that's pretty dope. Like, cool. Like, I've got to be that guy. I've got to get up at 5 and journal. And obviously that's not true, but saw a lot of value in journaling. And then I would go out and buy a bunch of journals. And for me, none of them really worked well because the journals either fell into one of two forms. They were one, kind of bullet form journals or like stream of consciousness journals where I was like, how's your day? Like, how are you feeling? Like, who do you want to be? And I was like, I am a little too ADD for this. I need focus, or otherwise I'm just going to keep writing down the same things. I'm going to write down the self-awareness without the honesty. Where does that get me? Or there were journals that were just stressed me out. They were like, all right, 7 a.m., write this down. 3 goals for the day. Come back at lunch. How you doing? At the end of the day, reflect on the day. 10 things you're grateful for. 5-year plan. It was just like, this is making me more stressed out. And of course, I'm hyperbolizing these, but they generally fell into those categories. So literally just in 2019, I was like, I want to create a journal that I would use. This is parallel to starting the podcast and like what I was learning and some of those things. So I basically just created a journal, the New Mindset Journal, which basically the whole pitch was just a mix of prompted and unprompted. So good balance, but also the value of journaling as I see it is the little things, right? What's something you're grateful for? How are you feeling? Where is your head at? Things like that, little calibrating tasks, but more so very, very challenging questions. Challenging questions that I came up with because I think that's my talent in life. And that's the value of it. So for me, I think a good journal and that the power of journaling is making you uncomfortable, not just reinforcing what you want to repeat to yourself. That's why I get value out of what am I grateful for, but at a certain point, it just becomes a rhetoric. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for another day. But like, how are you going to prove that to yourself? How are you going to go out there and actually prove that, not just written down because it sounds good and maybe feels good in the moment. So I'm big on calibration, but then very challenging questions that should take you 20 minutes to answer one question. And I found that works really, really well. And it relies on the idea that like there's a couple of different types of mindfulness as I see it. There's like an esoteric mindfulness that says mindfulness is spiritual, all energy flows through you, we're all one. That's kind of going back to what I was being cheeky about earlier, chakras and vibrations and stuff. That's great. It works for some people. It doesn't work for me. My mindfulness is very logical and it's very observation driven. I have lived through A, therefore I believe B. I've lived through B, therefore I believe C, like lawyer type stuff. Like here's the evidence, here's the judgment. That I have found is very powerful because we all have memory banks, we all have experiences. What we do with those experiences, what category we assign them to, that is what matters. And I think the best kind of journaling is a mix of prompted and unprompted that gets you to look at those memories and challenge them or re-question them, maybe helping you recategorize them so that when you're in the moment and you're dating someone or you're going down a path, you're relying on those memories to support healthy assumptions about yourself rather than I'm unworthy of love or, I'm an imposter in my business or whatever it is. That is mindfulness. And it goes back to what we were saying a minute ago about being open-minded to challenge what you already know or invite a new piece of information into your life.
And I think it compounds, right? Because what you're saying is this act of daily journaling, it's more than just journaling. You're questioning your thoughts, your beliefs, right? You're really internalizing and spending time thinking, which I think, like what you mentioned it before, the self-awareness aspect, right? It's easy to, one, if you're not self-aware, it's usually because you don't want to question these things, right? And then number two, like what you said, it's one step further than just self-awareness, because self-awareness without action, like what you said, is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. And usually the point that I really try to hammer home is like, journaling is great. I hope everyone who journals gets immediate value from it. It's like working out in the gym. You get beginner gains, right? Like the first couple months, you're like, oh man, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting bigger. It's great. And then eventually it kind of plateaus and then you've got to work harder to get the gains and lift harder. It's like the same way with journaling. I think if you haven't journaled before and you start it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I feel free. I feel lifted. I feel like I'm not carrying these things. And then eventually, if you don't follow kind of what we're talking about, it's just going to be repetitive rhetoric. I think the real value of journaling is to develop a journaler's mindset so that when you're not journaling, you're carrying that mentality with you. So that, for instance, twofold. One, you're out living your life. Something frustrates you. You don't sweep it under the rug. You address it. You're having an argument with a friend. You don't sweep it under the rug. You address it. You do the uncomfortable things. And also your actions follow suit as well with the things you're willing to try or not try or whatever it may be. That is the journaler's mentality. So that's why I'm so big on journaling. It's not just the moment that you do it and you feel good and you're like, oh, that was a good investment in my inner life, but it's your outer life too.